Well, I shall start this series on hydroxychloroquine with this quote from page number 49 of J.R.R. Tolkien's Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth, where it was said that better to know the quick pain of truth than the ongoing pain of a long-held falsehood. Poor little 3.5-month-old Corona doesn't know what fire of fear it has ignited throughout the world, and the world is burning. And how could it do that? It was just because of these fellow human beings who just spread so much of despair, and in the process got so desperate that we actually wreaked havoc amongst all of us. This is a webinar. This is a webinar for primarily a group of people with a background of training from biological science and of course my doctor friends. The topic is hydroxychloroquine and how it has been elevated to a godly status, levitating its cosmic realm of that Midas touch, which in Mr. Trump's language would be all about doing it in a style of a compassionate way. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We have to find hope in the darkest of days and focus it in the brightest of colors and not judge anything or anybody in the universe during this kind of a time. The threat of any contagion can twist our psychological responses to ordinary reactions, reactively leading us to behave in unexpected ways with a changed behavioral immune system." Is this selective corona hammering helping all of us? In fact, being from the diabetes background, my patients with diabetes or people with diabetes all across the world? No, it isn't. The escalating death figures, the stigma associated with a single bout of cough in public or even at home, dreading to go out to the pharmacy to fetch the regular stock of the life-saving molecule called insulin, delaying routine admissions for diabetic emergencies like hypoglycemia, diabetic ketoacidosis, or even a stroke in evolution or an unstable angina is taking a toll. We all need good stress, eustress, which is the optimum tension to cope with any given situation. But what is happening in this process of COVID-19 or novel corona is that we are all going through a process of goal-deviated thinking distress. And this is the existential crisis. Incredible distress to suppress the immunity and the entire immune system of the world. And this is due to the core anxiety about the unknown. I'll briefly touch upon what is going through our body. The body cells have a motive, have a certain design, which is called the self motive. And that is of course different from the non-self motive of foreign cells and pathogens like even SARS-CoV-2. The non-self motive is also known as a pathogen-associated molecular pattern called the PAMP. And this is another type of motive, which can be the damaged self motive, which can actually damage the internal milieu. The motive is expressed by a damaged or dying cell, which no longer serves the body any purpose. Stress damages the body's cells, transfiguring the self motives into damaged self motives. This elevates inflammation throughout the body in a similar way as if it were infected. This response, in the absence of an actual infection, is called a sterile immune response. Chronic overworrying, say for example COVID-19, now can intensify our vulnerability to viruses by creating an imbalance in the immune function. Excessive anxiety over COVID-19 can trigger an immune response that can increase inflammation and can actually readily put the immune system equivalent to the forces called the inflammasomes. If SARS-CoV-2 acts like the other viruses, then upon infection, these inflammasomes will now be called to action to escalate inflammation even further. During this time, there was this kind of cavalier comment fastened onto a small randomized clinical French trial, and this trial was basically so insignificant that nobody paid any attention to it, but unfortunately the dubiously most powerful man in the world. That fact that in many countries the compassionate use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine had already been formally indicated for most severe patients made it unethical to test proper efficacy due to the lack of a placebo arm or a comparator. Therefore, in my opinion, the irrational attribution of merit to this study encouraged his fellow countrymen to get out of head of evidence in the US. Mr. Trump had presented the drug as a game changer, even though his public health advisors have voiced uncertainty about its efficacy against the novel coronavirus. Following this, unfortunately, last month, or maybe fortunately, the time will tell, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, granted emergency approval to allow hospitals to use chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine from the national stockpile if clinical trials were not feasible. And therefore, the companies that manufacture both drugs are extravagantly ramping up production. I will come to why this is happening, what is the basic underlying mechanism of this thought behind hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine in the use of COVID-19 in the latter part.